Hello and welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Guy Murphy. Today I'm speaking with Renée McDonald, a counsellor and life coach who explores the relationship between spirituality, consciousness and well-being. In this conversation, Renée discusses a range of perspectives on health, including ideas that sit outside mainstream scientific consensus. The views expressed are her own and are presented as part of a broader discussion about spirituality and personal well-being. Listeners are encouraged to evaluate the information for themselves and consult qualified healthcare professionals regarding medical advice or treatment decisions. Thank you for joining me on the show today, Renée.
No problem, thank you.
What role does spirituality play in overall mental and emotional health?
In general, spirituality is important in our daily lives, more from the point of view of we are not just merely a body, like a jumpsuit going through life. Every day we go through life, we interact with nature, we interact with our home, our family, our loved ones, and there's a lot of proof now that there are spiritual connections even from the heart. So, a lot of the research suggests we are mind, body and spirit, not merely just a mind like a head on a stick kind of thing, or just a body traipsing through the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can talk more about that if you'd like. So, what's some of the sort of evidence that you'd point to for, this
Sure.
spiritual component that we have?
Yeah, so there's a lot of new researchers and people, particularly over the last 10, 15, 20 years, that have come forward about this. So there's people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. John Demartini. I don't know if you know the work of Dr. Emoto. There's the work of the Heart Math Institute. I kind of draw from those kinds of researchers for my discussions around where spirituality meets science. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the specific, findings that these people have found?
Well, that we are what we think, and that whatever we think we can then therefore create. And Dr. Emoto's work is pivotal around that. So he did experiments with water, and humans are 80% water or just fluid, but in terms of then if we use that scientific principle, if we are 80% fluid and water molecules, then whatever we say to ourselves, we become.
Okay.
It's pretty deep.
I understand the concept, but what makes him believe that?
He's done experiments with water, and by talking to water, so water molecules change. If you say, I love you to the water does more amazing things with its molecules. He did it with snowdrops. He did it with running water. He did it with, so put it under the microscope. And if you say, I hate you, water, or or something negative, it changes and it becomes more, I guess you could say, it doesn't flow as well. So, water flowing in a stream, it flows better if we speak to it. This is weird, wacky stuff, but he did all of this in test tubes and on Petri dishes as well.
So, what are some signs that a person may be spiritually disconnected or struggling?
When they say they are stuck. When we're stuck in our lives, that's usually connected to an inability to connect spiritually to ourselves.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So people describing their, frame of mind or their life as being stuck.
Yes.
Okay. And how do you distinguish spirituality from mental health, and where do they overlap?
Okay, so this is an interesting question, and even goes back to what is counselling, what is psychotherapy, what is mental health. So I can describe those. I'm lucky that I've been around in my field for around 25 years now, that I was trained differently to modern counsellors and psychotherapists and psychologists, where a lot of it focuses on the science too much. whereas I was trained more holistically back then. And so it gets down to, and bottom line is, what is psychotherapy? Psychotherapy, I was trained originally in that practice, and psychotherapy tends to be more long-term and working on changing the psyche. That's part of the, if we break down the word psychotherapy, there's the first bit which is related to the psyche. The psyche links to the soul. It's the Greek terminology is psyche equals soul.
Interesting.
That's why psychics call themselves psychics, because they're looking into your soul. Okay, and so so I see my work is soul work with other humans. It's not merely just that I've got someone in front of me who needs help with a problem. It's what is the problem.
Yeah.
And the problem, I was advised when I was trained, the problem is never the problem. It's how we perceive the problem that often is the problem.
Yeah. I think that's a valuable lesson.
Yeah, and so if we go back to psychotherapy, so what is psychotherapy? Psychotherapy, according to etymological terminology back to the Greeks, it actually means soul healing. What does psychology mean? Soul thinking. There's a big difference between those two origins of the words.
Okay, interesting.
And so this is kind of why I wanted to get back to, because this is how I was originally trained, to break down the words to actually know what service I'm actually offering the world and why I don't want to be a psychologist under Medicare. So I don't get Medicare, and I purposely don't get Medicare. Otherwise, I'm boxed in and I'm stuck. And if I'm stuck, then I can't produce mind, body, spirit healing with my clients.
Absolutely. No, that's totally fair. And so what would you recommend to someone who is struggling to find purpose in their life?
Purpose itself is about what you want to do with your life that's meaningful. So purpose always links to meaning. And most people, if they're heading towards a therapist, psychologist, anyone to turn to, their research is clear. Subconsciously, someone usually is questioning the meaning of their life.
Right, okay.
So most people don't even know, why am I actually going to that psychologist, or why am I going to that therapist? Well, it's usually because you're questioning the meaning in your life, but you're not even aware of that. That's the underlying driver of why you might actually be seeking therapy. And usually someone suicidal is questioning the meaning of their life, and they feel like their life is meaningless.
Okay.
This is really deep stuff. It's the stuff that we don't talk about as a society, but it's also the stuff that actually is either a driver or what's called a stuck point or a counterpoint. So we're either the driver of our lives or we're the passenger. And so we need to decide, are we driving or are we being the passenger?
Right, so it's basically a state of being a passenger, so to speak, is the idea of struggling to find purpose and not maybe taking conscious control of your life. Is that exactly? But things like, I want to go there. Things like COVID helped us all be passengers. Right.
And so we have to learn how to have self-leadership again. Self-leadership is very, very different to turning to our government, the governments of the world, or someone in, local community who might be a leader. It's very different to that. Self-leadership means that you are choosing your decision in the way that you see fit at all times. Obviously, modern life doesn't always allow us for that. And so I save the answers to these questions as no judgment of anyone. But this is what the research suggests.
Okay. And I'm just curious, you've mentioned a couple of like sort of societal phenomena, let's say. Where do things like the work-life balance or lack thereof, and people's attitudes towards success, the attitude towards status and that sort of thing, where does all that fit in today's society with our spiritual health and with these things that we're discussing?
So if we are turning to a doctor for our health at all times, we are not self-leading our own health journey, just as an example. This is what the research suggests in the spiritual traditions.
Okay. Would you mind explaining that a little bit further?
Yes, using that as one example. Okay. Right. So, you've got a cold or a flu. Oh, you have to go to the doctor for that. But societies in the past would write it out at home. I'm not saying for a second we shouldn't go to the doctor now, and that there are good medications and the like, but that all medications stop us from connecting to our psyche.
Okay. All medications?
All medications. This is controversial, I know.
Okay, so are you suggesting that we don't take medication?
No, not for a second.
Okay, so it's a trade-off of physical and spiritual wellness in that sense.
100%. You take the medication, you're going to be less spiritual. You take the medication, you might need it just to survive. That you need to know you might continue to be stuck and be putting band-aids on your problems that actually have deeper roots. Okay.
What if, say, hypothetically, because we've been talking about how spirituality is closely linked with mental health. I mean, your approach is obviously different to sort of the conventional approach. But I'm just wondering, like, say for instance, someone was prescribed a medication, and this is purely a hypothetical, not even particularly realistic, but say it only had benefits for their thinking, they had zero side effects, and it only had a benefit for their thinking and their frame of mind. Do you still think that is not worthwhile because they're getting their mental wellness from a medication? Is that what the idea is here, or is it something different?
Yes, that's probably what I'm saying, but I'm not saying for a second that, if someone's suicidal or if they need it for now, but I'm hearing regularly about GPs prescribing antidepressants when someone's grieving. That's really not good.
Right.
So if someone is grieving a lost loved one and you put a Band-Aid on that, you don't allow people to have sorrow. Okay, we're not talking about sorrow. It's not just grief, and it's not just mourning. It's actually sorrow.
Yep.
And so if we're not allowing sorrow, we're putting Band-Aids on that. And the research is clear from Renée Brown's work that when we forebode joy and we also slap medications on capacity to feel, we limit joy and we limit our capacity to have sadness too. So we're limiting our emotional range.
Okay. I mean, that seems fair enough, honestly. Basically, essentially the concept here is to avoid medication unless it's entirely necessary, and another approach or any other approach isn't particularly feasible.
Yes, absolutely. So it's not for a second am I saying don't go to your doctor, because I think that's really important. We have to go to doctors when we need it and allow, broken arm, car accidents, those kind of things. But I think we're going to medications first too frequently, and it's affecting all of our psyches. Yeah,
I think that you might be onto something there. I think that, I do definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, benefit to modern medicine, but I think that the things that you've said definitely have some truth to them, in that, we do use medicine sometimes as like a crutch almost, when we might not necessarily need it. So that's absolutely fair enough.
If just using as an example, if cavemen and people before the 20th century could survive without medication. Why do we need it all the time? These are the kind of questions I ask myself, and sometimes we talk about in therapy with my clients.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about being dangerous. I'm not talking about not doing the right thing. I'm talking about challenge the status quo sometimes in your thinking, and then you will then get leadership and self-leadership over your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that it's important to be flexible in your thinking, and that, science can, I think that science is very important as well. But I think that, there are different approaches for different people, and people are going to figure out that, and the more that you explore things and different ways of thinking and that sort of thing, the more that you can make your own informed opinion. So I do think that's important.
Exactly.
You're listening to Wellbeing. My guest today is Renée McDonald, a counsellor, psychotherapist and coach. How does a person's sense of meaning influence their well-being?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I like your question here. If we go to the research of the existential psychotherapist, there's a lot of research in this area. So your sense of meaning links deeply with your sense of purpose and your sense of passion about your life. You're going to be happier if you have a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose, and they go hand in hand. So I'll just give you an example.
Yeah.
So the person who might lose their loved one, and, I helped people in my earlier career with this. Some of them lost loved ones through, road accidents and the like. And then they join, a road accident support group, but then start their own podcasts or other things like this. A lot of people do this kind of stuff now. It's that you're using some kind of a pain situation or painful situation that you've had in your life, grief, loss, trauma, whatever it is, and then you're making it mean something both to you and others. And I think that when we do that as humans, we connect better to other humans when we've got this sense of meaning.
Absolutely. So in terms of how that meaning fits in with, well-being as a whole and that sort of thing, how does that sort of tie into?
So okay, I want to break it down to a number of different things, because I've done a degree in coaching as well as counselling and psychotherapy.
Yep.
So I can
absolutely.
talk about the life coaching angle of this, and I think it's important.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So the life coaching angle, and any one of your listeners can look into this and help themselves straight away, is look at the life wheel. So there's something called the life wheel. And you can just look it up online or Google in your images area and print out the life wheel. It's proven through research. If you have the life wheel in front of you and you keep up just looking at that life wheel and assessing your day-to-day life based on the life wheel, you will have a better life. So we've got about 7 or 8, sometimes 10, different areas of our life. So that's spiritual life, that's physical life, that's community life, it's relationships, it's fitness, finance, those kind of areas, yeah? And so the more balanced, so it's not just about life and work balance, it's actually about holistic balance that creates better meaning and also substance and depth of character in your life.
Okay. I've actually never heard of this life wheel. I'm just having a look at it now. So I can see that there's 8 dimensions by the looks of things, and there's, a sort of scale of 1 to 10.
Yep.
How do we evaluate our, where do we put things on this wheel, and how do we evaluate what's going on in our lives, and where should we be optimally on these things in terms of 1 to 10?
Yeah. All great questions. But say, for example, if you have terrible relationships with your family, then you might be somewhere between a 1 and a 4 in family. Just as a side note, there's a lot of different life wheels on the internet. So some of them have 7, some have 8, some have 10.
Oh, okay.
So, and some of them separate social with family, and so because I've done a bit of the research in this. So what I would say is you want to be over a 5 in all of the areas of your life. That's the ideal.
Right, right. So clearly this is a self-reflection tool.
Yes.
So, but how do we make that judgment about where we are? Are there indicators in these domains, or like, is it just a feeling-based thing?
It's a bit of both. So you can do it by your own almost personal research and experimentation on yourself. So, for example, if you know, most people know this about themselves, you know you're not exercising enough. You might be only a 1 or 2 in your physical fitness area, yeah? Mm-hmm. But if you're training 3 or 4 times a week, you might be more like a 6 or a 7 or an 8, depending on how hard you train.
Yep.
You're effectively giving yourself a score, of course, and so it's not an exact science. But most people know, oh, yeah, in my work I might be a 9 or a 10, but then in my fitness area I might only be a 5 or a 6. But that's still okay. You have more balance in your life if you're a 5 or more in all of those areas than if you're like a 0 to 4. But it's more about your sense of connection with all those different areas of your life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it seems like a useful tool. It's kind of, I think anything that involves self-reflection is beneficial, and like, staying in touch with yourself and that sort of thing. To me, it seems like almost a journal without the elaboration and wordy depth that is, which can be challenging for some people. Like I don't journal a lot because of, for that very reason. So it does seem like a good tool in that regard. Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of life coaches use this tool, and I use it when I do coaching, whether I do business coaching with other practitioners, which I do as well, or whether I do life coaching with someone coming to me for life coaching, or even some of my therapy clients, I use it as well. It's a good tool for anyone to use, and so your listeners can do this and not necessarily have to pay a life coach like hundreds of dollars, just for the privilege of getting this tool. But if you feel like you can't keep track, that's when to seek out therapy or a coach. Because what it also can do when you go to see a coach or a therapist, you can then use this tool as a marker about, okay, I'm not doing so well in these areas, I need to work on this. And sometimes it's about having an accountability partner, and good therapists and good coaches can be that accountability partner to say, okay, how are you going with your family at the moment? What would you like to keep working on? How are you going in regards to your fitness? How are you going in regards to your finances? So it's not only self-reflection in the kind of therapy and coaching environment, it can be used as an accountability, almost like a marker tool.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. I just want to learn a little bit more about life coaching. It's not something that I'm particularly familiar with. So what is the role of a life coach in someone's life?
Yeah, great question. Life coaching is different to therapy in that life coaches are actually meant to get you results. Therapists don't actually have to get you a result at all.
Right. So what kind of results are people looking for when they go to a life coach?
So I guess I'm even using that as an example before when we were talking about the life wheel, yeah? Mm-hmm. And that I then have strategies immediately that I can then say, let's look at this, and then we shine a light on things more in life coaching. So usually someone coming to a life coach has to not be in active trauma or active grief or active DV.
Right, okay.
So you usually find someone coming to a life coach should or is best to not be in a really traumatic situation in their life.
Okay. So it's about, rather than fixing an underlying mental health issue, it's more about helping someone who is already in a good place to truly like flourish and achieve their whatever their goals are. Does life coaching work? Does it focus on more the short term, say within the next 5 years, or is it is it more about looking further than that into the future?
Oh, it can be any or all of the above, but usually life coaching is about present and future more than the past.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Therapy will look at the past in order to get you a better present. Life coaching usually looks at the present and moving you into the future.
Yeah, okay. What daily practices do you find most effective for nurturing spiritual well-being?
Yeah, I have a daily practice of, it's like a spiritual intention setting and meditation that I do every day.
So mindfulness type practices?
It's probably something way beyond what you would consider normal mindfulness.
Okay. So what exactly are you referring to when you talk about meditation?
Okay. So in the yogic tradition and even in the Christian tradition, there's a lot of knowledge about in these kind of large religious movements. They regularly talk about meditation in kind of, both Christianity, Buddhism. It can go even well beyond just the standard, mindfulness about minding your mind and about noticing your thoughts and being under meditation. What I came across years ago was a concept called sankalpa. And sankalpa is actually, it's like a concept of saying I am. And this sounds like really simple, but it's really profound. You could, slot it into the life coaching area because it's about future posting yourself.
Okay. So this concept of I am, is this sort of is this a self-actualization thing? Is this
So you can talk about the sankalpa in the yogic tradition, which came from Satyanda yoga that I was doing at one point. So the argument is if you're in a meditative state and you say the I am, then you're more likely to have a successful life. They've been able to prove this to be true.
Okay. So it's more about like I guess, with conventional or whatever, let's just say non-yogic, I'm not sure exactly where this originated from, but when people, I feel like when people think about meditation and mindfulness, it's the idea is to completely clear your mind, right? Is to almost, do your best to completely clear your mind. It sounds like this is more so about the meditation is actually focused on something which is your sense of identity and bringing that into fruition. Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So often it's the opposite. It's almost like an oppositional kind of concept of if you were told growing up that you'd amount to nothing, you would then say something in a humble sense, because you've got to be careful about the Satyanda. So you would then say, I am flourishing, or I am well, or, I am successful, or things like that. It's not about, it's really interesting. We all have to be careful about our psyche, because whatever we put into it, we can potentially become as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the argument of the Satyanda yogis is that you actually have to stay from a humble place as well, where it's, I am healthy, I am well. So I have that kind of a Satyanda that I say every day.
Right. So it's about affirmations that also keep your ego in check. They don't let it go out of control.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds really. That sounds really beneficial.
So I came across this doing Satyanda yoga with these sankalpas, and the sankalpa is the tradition of the I am.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for.
And they argue that it's more than an affirmation. So a sankalpa is more than an affirmation. So an affirmation might be like, I am beautiful, things like that.
Yeah.
And you say it in front of a mirror, that kind of thing. The argument of the Satyanda yogis with the sankalpa is that you actually don't say it in front of a mirror at all.
Okay.
And because, again, it's about ego check. And it's about not worrying about anything or anyone else, and being a practitioner that I am, it's also about making sure that I'm still going to be in connection both to myself and the other. And in the existential tradition, that's called the I thou.
Yeah, right. So it's about meditating on these things that are simple yet deep in a way, not superficial, not looks related.
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask as well, are you familiar with, because we've been talking about existentialism, the ego, so on and so forth. Are you familiar with, the existential philosophers like Sartre, Kierkegaard, so on and so forth? Do you draw inspiration from these types of people, or does that not factor in as much to spirituality and that sort of thing?
Oh, no, it absolutely does. And I think this is where it gets really interesting, is a lot of those philosophers inform me as well how to be a good practitioner. So I trained, and in my master's, I majored in mindfulness, existentialism, and disenfranchised grief. So I've taught existential psychotherapy at a master's level. So I do use that in my practice as well. But what I'd probably say is I use a combination of the transpersonal with the existential in the work that I do with others. Because the existential is always there. We're born, we live, then we die. That's the existential.
Just to clarify, the transpersonal is about transcendence of the ego and a higher sense of something that, a sense of something beyond just yourself. Whereas existentialism is kind of more about your own ego, your own thinking, and where that fits in with... Yeah, but actually less that area more fits into Freud and Jungian, the ego. That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say the existential is actually less about ego and more about how we live our lives.
Okay. But in terms of the balance between the transpersonal and the existential, it's about inward reflection and outward gratitude, acceptance, so on and so forth. Is that right?
Yes. Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So the existential, like Kierkegaard, Nietzsche. So, you've got a lot of those kind of philosophers that are very nihilistic, if you know what I mean by that. So basically they're very dark and very morose, very much not into hope-seeking. So I think the way I work is a combination of acceptance of our life as well as helping to bring hope back to my fellow humans.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Nietzsche. How do you feel about his idea of will to power? He believed that all people have this innate drive to, become more powerful, or however you want to spin that, more successful, that sort of thing. That's more of an egoistic drive, right?
Yes.
Do you think that there's room for these concepts in spirituality and in self-transcendence and so on, or do you think that that's a detrimental philosophy?
I think it's an amazing philosophy so long as we keep our ego in check. As harsh as this is, you look at people like Stalin, Hitler, those types, that's will to power, isn't it? Where does power go when power goes wrong? So we have to look at where power goes wrong in order to use these concepts well.
Absolutely.
So for me, even having this conversation, I'm thinking about your listener, not just merely me as a human telling my story.
So it's about empowerment to a degree, but only in the sense such that there has to be a level of humility.
Absolutely. Okay. So, and I've been humble slapped and ego slapped a lot of my career, and often that's been a good thing. But anyone can misuse power, but also anyone can use power well. So power used well changes the world, like Martin Luther King.
What can we do to make sure that this sense of power, or this will to power, so to speak, doesn't corrupt us or corrupt others around us? How can we keep that in check? And how can we identify when we're thinking about these things, when we're thinking specifically about, power and ambition, or whatever you want to call it, what are some signs that might be getting out of hand in our minds, and what can we do to keep that in check?
Yeah, and I can see it everywhere in the self-help movement and with other coaches and with a lot of coaches just thinking they can charge whatever they want willy-nilly. There's so many different levels to this. Firstly, you have to be aware that power corrupts, and you also have to accept we all have power in order to check yourself about your power stuff.
But are there any sort of hard and fast signs that, that it might be getting out of hand? Is it when we sort of project harm on or bring harm or discomfort or whatever it may be to other people? Is it about, maintaining that sense of humility and making sure that, we're not affecting others or our beliefs and drives aren't becoming unhealthy, that sort of thing? What are some signs that might be happening?
Well, the problem is I don't think that's necessarily the problem, because this is deeper than even what you're bringing forward. Okay, so we have massive power issues in Australia in politics at the moment. So if we want to look at will to power, we've got issues there within our own backyard in leadership. The number one thing with power you have to accept, sometimes we do harm to others even inadvertently when we don't even want to. And that's another part of the power humility place.
That is true, yeah, that's a good point.
Humans are really fascinating creatures. We're better than AI and we're not better than AI all in one. But what I think AI will, probably push into us is have to accept our imperfections, and that is actually what makes us better than AI.
How is AI going to do that for us, do you think?
Oh, no, I think how are we going to do that in order to use AI properly for humans? I think it's the reverse.
Right, okay.
So first we have to accept that we can harm other humans in order to accept the challenge of AI.
I mean, basically, the way that you've described it makes me think of this concept that I'm sure you're probably familiar with, but it's called the hedgehog dilemma, where humans, and we're not talking about power now, we're talking about, human interaction more generally and more broadly and that sort of thing. So, this concept is that, hedgehogs have to stay close together to maintain their warmth, and they prick themselves with their pins inadvertently. Do you think that this is a natural byproduct of self-empowerment, and that through empowering ourselves, that inadvertently, even if we're really making an effort to not do that, that we will affect other people just by simply trying to improve ourselves in whatever way it may be?
Yes and no. I think the opposite is true as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those who don't want to improve themselves cannot expect those of us who are trying to improve ourselves to actually get along with them.
Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. So because I've had this dilemma in my own family, the expectation that I'll just go along with whatever they say when what they're saying is actually harmful.
You're listening to Wellbeing. My guest today is Renée McDonald, a counsellor, psychotherapist and coach. So basically, at the end of the day, we have to prioritise ourselves and our own, spiritual well-being. And if that involves not adhering to someone else's line of thinking or behaviour, even if that's detrimental to them, that's the right decision to make in terms of your spiritual wellness. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yes. I would take it one step further. The whole idea behind self-improvement is to improve everyone, and that if people choose not to improve themselves, that's on them, not on the person improving themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, we've got another important question. What have you observed about the relationship between suffering and personal growth?
So suffering and personal growth, and I feel like I even need to bring back just some of the things I was talking about before about harm, because this is really important. A therapist's aim is to do no harm. That's the aim. And also to do good. Mm-hmm. And this is the catch, is that when someone is suffering, if a person comes to therapy or coaching, and if that person is suffering, the whole point is a problem shared is a problem halved. It's about alleviating that suffering. And sometimes alleviating that suffering is through what's called catharsis. And catharsis, for the listeners, is a process of almost like upending your life so that you can let go of the hard feelings and those kinds of things. And that in the end, that is actually doing good for the person coming into, whatever service they're coming into. And so there's a definite link between, the self-improvement and suffering and all those kinds of things, like in the question, right? It's really weird and sad, but humans seem to need to go through suffering in order to improve their lives. It's not for an external person to say, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have been that, you shouldn't have done all those kind of things, even if harm has been done beforehand, because sometimes the person suffering isn't even aware of what's happened to others around them.
Yeah.
And we keep going into all these like places of narcissism, empath, all these kind of concepts in these spaces. But before the last kind of 10 years or so, most people didn't even talk about these concepts. And the whole thing is we used to help people more with their suffering. We're now almost laughing at people when they suffer.
Because, you mentioned that therapy, traditional or conventional psychotherapy, is about the problem shared is a problem halved. Is your approach a little bit more radical or a little bit less? I don't want to say less empathetic, but is it about more sort of giving them the bare minimum that they need, and then they do the vast majority of the work themselves? Is that more so what the idea is here, or have I missed the mark on that one?
There's so many different things. I don't run therapy or coaching or any service I'm providing other humans in a box.
Right. So, so you don't believe in, well, not to say that you don't believe, but you don't place as much emphasis on diagnoses. Oh,
definitely not. Definitely not. In fact, the diagnosis sometimes comes between the person and actually them fully and totally healing.
Yeah. I actually am inclined to agree with you there, because I have a degree in psychology myself, and it seems to me that having a diagnosis is kind of a double-edged sword, because you can get access to treatment and tailored treatment for that specific thing, but it also can affect your identity and the way that you think and behave, because you've got this set of symptoms that you now align your self with, your sense of self, and your whole life and identity. So I think that it can be, it has pros and cons. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And I don't think we're giving people enough informed consent about what the diagnosis actually means for them.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So, would you mind explaining that a little bit more? Like, do you think that there's not enough explanation of the intricacies of people's behaviour and how they fit into those diagnoses and things like that? Okay.
Yes. But then when we put ourselves in the box of, say, using let's go with depression and anxiety, because they were the two things that psychology actually took on board back in the Medicare early days, when there was the better help or better access, service like offered to the community. It was mostly about depression and anxiety, because then that would take the heat off the psychiatrists and the GPs. So that what people don't realise is that depression is always masking something else. That's how I was trained. Depression always masks. Often depression is anger turned inwards, is resentment turned inwards. And again, I'm generalising, it's not the same 100% of the time, but it usually means there's something deeper going on. And taking the medications and going to GPs and psychiatrists regularly for that, if it's getting you nowhere, then seek out different help and support, because it might be that there's a different way that you could approach it.
Just to wrap up with one little quick question, if that's okay, I just want to ask this one last one. What have your clients taught you about what gives life meaning?
There's a lot that they've taught me. Looking at other people's lives has helped me live my own life better in the driving seat. Looking at other people's lives has helped me have deeper, closer relationships. Looking at other people's lives has helped me realise the ills of my ways and the ills of other people in my life. And I've come to conclusions that otherwise I wouldn't have if I wasn't a therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. So just through more or less, simple observation and seeing what works for people and what doesn't, you can learn almost passively. I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, it gives, therapy helps the other person have more meaning in their lives. And so it's like part of my purpose is to help others and be of service to them too. And to try to always do no harm as much as I can, and to try to be as humble as I can. But by using all these different strategies we've talked about so far, but also knowing that I'm only one person in their life and it may or may not work as well, and then also having different ways of referring on to other people, and also having different ways I work with people, so that then there are other ways outside the system. If, say, the system doesn't support them, there are always other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, we'll have to wrap it up there, Renée, but it's been really interesting to chat with you. Thank you very much for coming on the show and having this dialogue with me today. I think that, there's a lot that people can learn from that. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for your time, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Not a problem. My pleasure. I've been speaking with Renée McDonald, a counsellor and life coach who explores the relationship between spirituality, consciousness, and well-being. Thanks for listening. I'm Guy Murphy, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.